The collapse did not begin with a dramatic fall, but with a quiet erosion that Deacon Sharp barely noticed until it was already too late. Losing his job stripped away more than income. It dismantled the fragile sense of purpose he had built around stability and redemption. Each morning arrived heavier than the last, burdened by unanswered questions about the future and the unspoken shame of failing once again to become the man he promised himself and others he would be. Financial pressure pressed in from all sides, turning everyday decisions into reminders of his vulnerability. Deacon had lived on the margins before, but this felt different. This time, he had something to lose, and the fear of losing it hollowed him out from the inside. In that state of quiet desperation, Deacon found himself drawn to Taylor Hayes. Not with intention, but with instinct. Taylor did not judge him or rush to fix what felt irreparably broken. She listened, and in her listening he felt seen in a way that soothed the sharpest edges of his anxiety. He spoke of the job loss, the debt, the gnawing dread that his future was narrowing rather than opening. Taylor responded not as a savior, but as a steady presence, offering empathy that did not diminish his agency. Her compassion became a salve, slowly easing wounds he had long ignored, and in that shared space of honesty, something tender began to grow. What neither of them acknowledged at first was how easily empathy could slide into intimacy. The warmth of Taylor's reassurance lingered after their conversations ended, echoing in Deacon's thoughts during sleepless nights. For Taylor, the pull was equally unsettling. She had dedicated her life to helping others navigate boundaries. Yet here she found her own blurring. The more she understood Deacon's fear, the more she recognized pieces of herself reflected back. Her own history of loss, resilience, and the temptation to heal others as a way of avoiding her own pain. The connection felt private, precious, and dangerous all at once. As weeks passed, Deacon began to seek out Taylor deliberately. Meetings that began as conversations became stolen moments carved out of days that no longer felt bearable otherwise. He spent more time with her, less time at home, convincing himself that he deserved this reprieve, that it was temporary, that he remained in control. Yet with every clandestine visit, the distance between him and his wife widened, filled by silence and rationalization. Guilt followed him like a shadow, but it could not compete with the solace he found in Taylor's presence. The pull was not merely physical or romantic. It was the intoxicating relief of being understood without expectation. That relief came at a cost. Deacon's absence did not go unnoticed, especially by Hope Logan, whose sensitivity to emotional shifts had been honed by years of navigating complicated family dynamics. She sensed the change in her father, the evasive answers, the missed commitments, the distracted look in his eyes. It unsettled her, not because she suspected betrayal immediately, but because she recognized the signs of someone unmoored. Hope worried that Deacon was spiraling, repeating patterns he had sworn to leave behind, and the fear of losing him again ignited a quiet resolve to uncover the truth. The tension escalated when Steffi Forrester Finnegan stumbled upon a moment she was never meant to see. It was not overt or explicit, but intimacy does not require spectacle to reveal itself. A shared glance held too long, a closeness that spoke of familiarity rather than coincidence. Steffi's shock hardened quickly into suspicion. She had lived through the consequences of blurred boundaries before, and she knew how swiftly such entanglements could implode. The realization that her mother might be crossing ethical and emotional lines with Deacon ignited both anger and fear. Steffi confronted Taylor with a bluntness born of love and alarm. She did not mince words about the moral implications or the devastation that would follow if the truth surfaced. Her warning carried the weight of experience: families torn apart, trust eroded, reputations ruined. Taylor listened, shaken by the clarity of Steffi's concern, yet unable to deny what had already taken root inside her. The confrontation forced her to confront the dissonance between who she believed herself to be and what she was becoming. She knew Steffi was right and that knowledge cut deeper than accusation. Meanwhile, Hope's worry evolved into action. She began to watch more closely, piecing together patterns in Deacon's schedule, noting the coincidences that felt increasingly deliberate. Her motivation was not to accuse, but to protect her family, her father, and perhaps even the fragile hope that this could still be resolved before it caused irreparable harm. The act of following him felt intrusive, yet necessary, driven by a quiet dread that the truth, whatever it was, would change everything. Deacon, caught between guilt and longing, felt the walls closing in. Each step toward Taylor felt like a step away from the life he was trying to salvage. He told himself that honesty could wait, that clarity would come later, that he would find a way to make things right. But the longer the secrecy persisted, the heavier it became, until the weight threatened to crush him. He understood, on some level, that this path led toward exposure, toward pain for people who did not deserve it. Still, the comfort he found with Taylor made the risk feel bearable, even necessary. The story unfolding was not one of villains and victims, but of flawed people navigating loss, desire, and fear. Financial instability had cracked Deacon's foundation. Compassion had opened Taylor's heart. Vigilance had sharpened Steffi's resolve. And love had driven Hope to seek answers. Each motivation was understandable, even sympathetic, yet together they formed a volatile mix poised to explode. As secrets layered upon secrets, the atmosphere thickened with inevitability. Truth has a gravity that cannot be denied indefinitely, and the closer it drew, the more each character felt its pull. Whether through confrontation or confession, the reckoning loomed, promising consequences that would ripple outward, reshaping relationships and redefining boundaries. What began as solace in a moment of despair had become a crucible, testing integrity, loyalty, and the fragile hope that redemption could survive desire. In the end, the question was not whether the truth would emerge, but how much damage it would inflict when it did, and whether any of them would recognize themselves on the other side of it. Revelations emerging from the bold and the beautiful have ignited a slow-burning dread that feels all too familiar to longtime viewers. A dread rooted not in spectacle but in pattern. The possibility that Taylor Hayes could vanish without a trace does not arrive as a sudden shock. It arrives like a shadow lengthening at the edge of the frame, visible long before it consumes the light. In a world where history never truly stays buried, disappearance often speaks louder than death. And it is precisely this silence, this absence, that sets every alarm ringing. Especially for Steffi Forrester Finnegan, whose instincts have been honed by trauma, betrayal, and survival. If Taylor were to disappear, Steffi would not ask whether something is wrong. She would ask who is responsible. And at the top of that list would stand Sheila Sharp. Steffi's suspicion is not born of paranoia but of memory. She has lived through Sheila's capacity for violence, manipulation, and calculated cruelty. She knows what it means to underestimate a woman who can smile with one hand while tightening a snare with the other. Even now, as Sheila presents herself as reformed, restrained, and newly devoted to peace, Steffi senses the tension beneath the surface. The way a volcano pretends to be a mountain until the moment it erupts. When Steffi learns of her mother's growing feelings for Deacon Sharp, the fear sharpens into urgency. She confronts Taylor not out of judgment but out of desperation, warning her that proximity to Deacon is not merely complicated but dangerous. Especially when that man is bound, legally, emotionally, and historically, to Sheila. Taylor hears the warning, understands it intellectually, and yet fails to fully internalize it emotionally. Her connection with Deacon does not begin in recklessness but in vulnerability. In the quiet space where two damaged people recognize each other's fractures. As a therapist, Taylor knows better than most where boundaries should lie. As a woman who has spent years compartmentalizing her own needs for the sake of others, she also knows how easy it is to rationalize crossing them. What begins as empathy deepens into attachment, and attachment into desire. The danger is not that Taylor is unaware of the risk, but that she believes awareness alone might be enough to contain it. Steffi, however, has learned the hard way that Sheila does not require proof to justify retaliation. Suspicion alone can be a trigger. The thought that Taylor might be entangling herself with Deacon, Sheila's husband, feels like standing beneath a guillotine and arguing about whether the blade has actually fallen. Yet, Sheila has been restrained for some time, that much is true. She has performed remorse convincingly, spoken the language of accountability, and adopted the posture of someone trying to do better. But restraint is not the same as transformation, and Steffi senses that the rage inside Sheila has not been extinguished, only compressed. Like a time bomb counting down in silence, it waits for the right provocation. That provocation arrives when the line between patient and therapist is not merely blurred but crossed. Despite their attempts to resist temptation, Taylor and Deacon succumb to the gravity pulling them together. The spoilers for the week of January 19th through the 23rd confirm what Steffi fears most: a passionate kiss that shatters any remaining illusion of control. Once the wall falls, desire surges forward unchecked, and the consequences become unavoidable. This is not a fleeting mistake that can be quietly buried. It is a rupture that will reverberate outward, inevitably reaching Sheila's ears. The question is not whether Sheila will find out, but how she will respond when she does. Some might hope for restraint, for a moment of genuine growth in which Sheila confronts betrayal without violence, choosing dignity over destruction. Such a response would suggest real evolution, a triumph of will over impulse. Yet that version of events feels almost antithetical to everything the character represents. Growth, while admirable, is rarely dramatic. And Sheila has never been a creature of quiet endings. More likely is a reaction that blends cunning with chaos. A response that does not explode immediately but coils inward before striking. Sheila may surprise everyone by appearing calm, by presenting herself as composed and unbothered, all while plotting something far more devastating than an outburst of rage. Or she may abandon restraint altogether, embracing the darkness she has always carried, allowing it to guide her actions without apology. The comparison to her deceased granddaughter Luna Nozawa is not made lightly. Luna's descent into extremity serves as a grim reminder that madness in this family does not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it manifests as cold, deliberate resolve. For Steffi, the fear becomes unbearable when Taylor stops responding. A missed call turns into unanswered messages, then into silence that stretches far too long to be benign. In Steffi's mind, the worst-case scenario does not feel speculative, it feels inevitable. She imagines Sheila orchestrating a disappearance rather than a murder, understanding that ambiguity can be more powerful than finality. Kidnapping, after all, leaves no body, no closure, only endless uncertainty. And Sheila has always thrived in the spaces between truth and illusion. Steffi's imagination fills in the gaps with horrifying clarity. She can almost see Sheila using Taylor's phone, crafting messages to reassure the family, claiming that Taylor simply needs time away, a retreat, a chance to save the world or herself. The lie would be plausible enough to delay action, subtle enough to avoid immediate suspicion, and cruel enough to deepen the psychological torment. Steffi knows this because she knows Sheila. Deception is not merely a tactic for her, it is an art form. The history that fuels Steffi's terror cannot be dismissed. Sheila has harmed Steffi directly, leaving scars both visible and invisible. She has endangered Taylor before, shattered families, and turned lives into collateral damage in her personal wars. While Sheila insists she is trying to be better, trying to suppress the demon within, Steffi understands that demons do not disappear simply because they are denied. They wait, they listen, they strike when provoked. As the revelations escalate, the show hints that Sheila does, in fact, lose control upon learning of Taylor and Deacon's betrayal. The restraint she has maintained begins to fracture, and the fury she has kept buried threatens to surface with catastrophic force. Whether that force manifests as violence, abduction, or psychological warfare remains to be seen. What is clear is that Sheila's reaction will not be measured, and it will not be harmless. The dramatic tension lies not only in what Sheila might do, but in how powerless Steffi feels to stop it. She is no longer a child watching adults make catastrophic choices. She is a woman who understands the stakes and yet finds herself trapped by them. If Taylor disappears, Steffi will not hesitate to point the finger at Sheila, regardless of evidence. In a world where Sheila's past crimes loom large, suspicion alone may be enough to set the next chain of events into motion. Ultimately, this storyline is not just about betrayal or obsession. It is about cycles that refuse to break. Taylor's compassion, Deacon's weakness, Sheila's rage, and Steffi's vigilance all collide in a narrative that feels both inevitable and tragic. Each character is driven by motivations that make sense within their own emotional logic. Yet those motivations converge toward disaster. As the bold and the beautiful continues to tease shocking developments, one thing remains certain. If Taylor Hayes vanishes, the silence she leaves behind will be louder than any gunshot. And in that silence, Steffi's fear will crystallize into certainty. Sheila's darkness will move closer to the surface, and the fragile illusion of peace will finally shatter. Whatever comes next will not be subtle, and it will not be easily undone. The countdown, it seems, has already begun.